So if you're following the news, you are likely aware of the conflict between Russia and Ukraine, which is often being escalated by the media. Now, if you're investing in P2P loans on Europe's most popular P2P lending platforms, chances are that you are exposed to those two countries. In this video, we will have a look at the impact of the geopolitical conflict between Russia and Ukraine on the lending business, and we will answer the question of whether you should be worried about your investments in loans in Russia and Ukraine. I'm your host Jakub from P2P Empower, and if you are new here and your goal is to become a more educated P2P investor and learn how to make sustainable passive income online, consider subscribing and hit the notification bell to not miss out on future videos. Alright, before we start, I shall point out that this is no investment advice. Investing in loans is risky and you might lose your capital regardless of which country you invest in. So let's first give you a bit of background so you are up to date about what's going on. If you have been following the news, you might have noticed that Ukraine is considering joining NATO, which Russia is not a big fan of. Russia wants to protect its own territory, and if Ukraine joins NATO and strengthens its relationship with the United States, Russia won't be happy. For this reason, Russia has exercised political pressure on Ukraine by deploying soldiers at Russian-Ukrainian border, basically saying, hey, don't even think about joining NATO, otherwise we will invade your country. This has been blown up by the media, which has caused a lot of panic amongst investors who are investing in Russia and Ukraine. Many Ukrainians actually don't believe that it's in Russia's interest to invade the country. They see it as a bluff to make the Ukrainian government stop the collaboration with the United States. Many Ukrainians actually believe that a full-scale invasion is very expensive for Russia, not to talk about all the additional economic sanctions that Russia would face from other countries. At the end of December 2021, Russia actually pulled back 10,000 soldiers from the border, which reduced the imminent threat to invade Ukraine. This situation isn't really anything new. Russia has been in conflict with Ukraine since 2014. Last year, I've had an insightful interview with the CEO of Twino, Anastasia Olejnika, where we discussed the political implication between Russia and Ukraine on its lending business. The takeaway from this interview is that the impact of the pandemic on the lending business is far greater than the geopolitical conflicts between those countries. I believe that this is still valid today. If you look at the performance of lenders for the last 2 years, we have seen many struggling by the impact of the pandemic rather than the conflict between Russia and Ukraine. That being said, we should not ignore a potential threat. A war between Russia and Ukraine would certainly have some implication on the economy of both countries. To gather some of the more recent information, we have reached out to Peerberry, Twino, Robocash and the Lime Credit Group to get their comments on the latest political developments in Russia and Ukraine. All of them said that it is very difficult to make any type of prediction on the impact of the potential conflict at the moment. Peerberry's partners informed us that not the entire country is affected by the current situation, and that they don't issue loans in regions that are involved in a military conflict. They also said that during the armed conflict in the Donbas region in Ukraine in 2014, Ukraine as a country was not paralyzed and business continued as normal in regions that were not affected. Twino informed us that they believe that the lending business is relatively immune to market fluctuations in Russia, and the lending company Limezyme in Russia also confirmed that the business models of the top 30 lenders in Russia are quite flexible, which means that they are able to adapt to new market conditions. On top of that, there is also a proposal that the interest cap on payday loans in Russia could decrease from 1% to 0.8% per day. So as you can see, apart from geopolitical risks, there are always market-relevant changes that the lenders are dealing with. Alright, so in short, lenders in Ukraine and Russia are monitoring the situation and adapting their lending practices, such as not issuing loans in risky regions. Now let's see whether this conflict has some kind of negative impact on the current lending portfolio from an investor's point of view. So let's have a look at the performance of a real P2P portfolio in those countries. If you have been following this channel and watched my latest portfolio update, you are aware that I'm investing myself in Ukraine and Russia, which is why I can also share with you some of my own experience in those two markets. To give you some context first, I'm currently investing in loans from Russia and Ukraine only on Peerberry. My total portfolio on Peerberry is, at the time of recording, more than 18,000 euro, and out of that, around 68% are loans from Russia and Ukraine. Here's the exact breakdown of my portfolio in those two countries. What's important is that this section of the portfolio is currently earning 11.50% per year. That's obviously relevant, as you always want to look at the risk and reward ratio. What's also relevant to mention is that so far none of the investors ever lost any money on Peerberry, as the buyback guarantee was always able to cover any delayed loans. Keep in mind, however, that many of those lenders are relatively new companies operated by profitable lending groups like GoFingo and Aventus Group. If you want to analyze the financial performance of those companies, you will unfortunately be only able to read relatively outdated information from 2020. That's, by the way, often the case also when it comes to other lending companies. I went through the latest available financial reports and retrieved the debt and equity ratios as well as the profit and loss information for 2020. While the Aventus Group is not financing more than 45% of the combined loan book from all lenders under the group with P2P investors, on an individual level, lenders might apply more aggressive leveraging. Now, despite the fact that some lenders were quite leveraged in 2020 when the pandemic started, most of them ended the year with a profit, and all of them managed to repay all investors without any delayed or pending payments. You should also keep in mind that there is an internal agreement between the Aventus Group companies that says that in the case where a lender would not be able to fulfill the buyback guarantee, the largest lenders within the group would step in and cover all obligations towards investors. You can find this agreement in the document section on Peerberry's website. So from my experience, I can tell that Peerberry is doing a good job in fulfilling the obligation towards investors. One can certainly tell that Peerberry's business partners have systems in place that allow them to quickly adapt to new market environments while simultaneously generating above average returns for investors. And so far, I have not noticed any negative effects of the ongoing political conflict on my own portfolio in those two countries. In fact, you might not notice this, but Peerberry is in full control of the listings on the platform, and if they notice that the lender is struggling, they make sure that the debt is repaid and they temporarily suspend new loan listings from that particular lender on the platform. This is not something you will be experiencing on other platforms where the lender is immediately suspended and your money is locked in pending payments or in recovery. Also, the exposure of loans in less regulated markets is rather limited on Peerberry, which again just shows that they aim to provide the best risk-adjusted returns. Now, obviously, there is always room for improvement. I would definitely love to see some interim reports and audits by more reputable auditing firms. On the other hand, one should also realize that this will come at a cost, which will be forwarded to the investors, so the interest might also decrease. So now you should have a good idea about the current position of lenders towards the conflict between Russia and Ukraine, and that it really did not have an impact on my portfolio from companies that operate under the Aventus and GoFingo group. It obviously also comes down to the lenders and the people who run those businesses. From my own research and experience, the political risk between countries don't have such a huge impact on the lending portfolios, such as forex risk, inflation, or even domestic politics, which are often connected to regulatory changes. On the other hand, no one can for certain predict the economic impact of a war between Ukraine and Russia and how exactly it would affect the lending business. Chances are high that most lenders will adapt and restrict issuance in risky regions, but no one can tell you exactly how this will turn out. We can certainly observe the situation in Kazakhstan and see how lenders can cope with domestic challenges which caused banks to temporarily suspend their operations. If a potential military invasion in Ukraine would lead to the shutdown of the Ukrainian banking system, investors would have to accept liquidity delays as well as possible losses. Because if there is no debt collection, there are no interest payments and lenders' reserves are obviously limited. We won't be telling you whether to stay exposed to those countries or exit your investments. It really comes down to your own risk tolerance. If you can't sleep at night because you are worried, then you will feel better by decreasing your exposure or exiting those markets. Keep in mind that there is always country risk to consider in every market, and certain risks might materialize faster than others. It really depends on the quality of information that you have available, as well as on your risk assessment. We are actually planning an interview regarding this topic in the upcoming weeks. So if you want to learn more about country-relevant risks, subscribe to this channel to get notified when the interview is out. Now, let me know in the comments below if you have made any changes to your portfolio because of the political conflict between Russia and Ukraine. I'm really curious to hear your thoughts on this matter. If you found this video helpful, do me a favor and hit the like button. Thanks for watching, and I will catch you in the next one.